Mythology is what people think of as stories that happen to fictional folk in a made-up past. Consequently, when we suggest something is a myth, we often mean that it's untrue, that it's a fiction, that it's something masquerading. It could be an event, it could be a person, it could be a viewpoint that's contrary to reality or what we perceive as reality or common sense. To the rational mind, a myth is something that's made up in order to achieve a goal associated with power or wealth, or maybe just mere entertainment. Whilst myths have been used like this, it isn't their purpose. And their importance to the human mind, whether that's a rational mind or anything else, can't be underestimated. A myth is a metaphor. It's an infinitely complex set of symbols that work on multiple levels at once to produce meaning in a human life. Sometimes people are critical of life. They say that it has no meaning. Well, that's a bit like turning up to a secluded beach and asking why there are no sandcastles. I mean, we have to build the sandcastles. We have to get the skills together. We have to have the desire. We have to have the tenacity to fail over and over again until there are castles constructed in patterns that are recognizable as castles. Then we can play knights, or we can build a moat, or we can crush them all and start again. Myths give us metaphors. They give us the skills to construct the meaning. Myths are like join-the-dot puzzles, where each point is a particular moment in the story that interacts with other moments. And these can have meaning at a local level, maybe to a family, or to just a town, or a nation, a culture, a religion. Or they can have a deeper human meaning. For tens of thousands of years, people have had precisely the same experiences, whether they're a Neolithic stonemason, a wandering Arab caravaner, a Wall Street broker, or a broke street kid by a wall. We're all born, we grow, we go through puberty, we have a relationship with some idea of family, we all get sick. We all have the knowledge that we're one day going to die, haven't the faintest idea what it feels like. We don't know what happens next. The meanings in some stories are the same to everyone, but the way we connect those dots, the line thickness, the colour pen, the dynamic qualities of the stroke, these can all be really, really different. So, two stories can have the same meaning, even if they're developed on opposite sides of the world, or in completely different historical periods. Each unit of meaning inside a story, each dot in the pattern, is a symbol. A symbol is a key that unlocks an idea. It could be a really simple idea, such as a red rose meaning I love you. Or it could be a really complex idea, such as a cross standing for the sacrifice of a god to atone for all the sins of an evil world. Sometimes simplicity hides the very, very complex. Take a traffic light. So we have expectable patterns of colour laid out in familiar plans, and they're making predictable changes. In the UK, they're red, amber, green. But what do they mean, and how can we analyse that meaning? Okay, so there are three basic states. One means stop, red. One means go, it's green. And the middle one, amber, means change. We could say, if you picture them in a triangle, that we have two steady states, stop and go, and they're at the base of the triangle, and there's a dynamic state at the top, which is amber. Two steady states, one dynamic state that interact with each other to form a meaning in your head. Once that meaning is interpreted, then an action follows. The body responds. We don't think, that's a red light. Red is interpreted as a steady state in this country, specifically a law bound in treatment to cease progress. By the time we thought that, we'd have careened into a truck. Instead, our body responds. Our foot moves to the brake pedal and the vehicle stops in a practiced manner. Hopefully. Visual symbol, automatic unlocking, unmediated bodily response. We just do it when we see the symbol. A myth is a complex web of lights that create sometimes subtle, sometimes powerful versions of exactly the same thing as those traffic lights. The key unlocks the meaning. Let's take a story that's complex enough for review, but familiar enough to understand. For Europeans and Americans, we become familiar with myths and meaning in the form of fairy tales. We recognise a fairy tale by its beginning and its end markers. Once upon a time, they all lived happily ever after. So once upon a time marks the opening of a mythical world, like the wardrobe in Narnia or the blue pill in The Matrix. Some of our familiar stories aren't that original or unique, and stories we think of as European have endless counterparts in other areas of the world. And I want to talk about Little Red Riding Hood, or if you're in China, you may be more familiar with the Tiger Grandmother. Many of us know the story. A mother tells her daughter, clad in red, that she must travel through the dark forest to take food to her grandma. On the way, she meets a wolf who distracts her with flowers before scampering off to eat grandma and take her place, so that he can devour the young girl as well. Well, Little Red is shocked by grandma's big eyes, and her big nose, and her big teeth. And when it turns out not to be a hairy grandma at all, but old Wolfie, a woodcutter hears the noise and comes in to rescue the fair young maiden. He slices the wolf's belly open and fills it with stones. The poor beast drags itself back into the forest in misery. Let's look at the big picture. This is a story that was told by older women, mothers, nurses, governesses, to young girls who were expected to come of age in a few short years. It's a warning, and possibly in many cases deeply rooted in personal experiences. The mother sends the girl on a journey into the dark woods, and the dark woods often represent the unknown. In this case, it's her life. The mother sends the child on her journey to become the grandmother. That's the metaphor. It's time to take the journey into womanhood. Hence the red clothes. Anyone that's seen the new Pixar film with the red panda know precisely what that is all about. So on her journey, she's now going to meet two types of men. One is the wolf. The wolf's going to distract her with flowers, and it's going to end up devouring her, ending her life. The other type of man is the woodcutter type. Probably has a beard, definitely has a job, and he can defend you from the wolves. Men, take note. This story is telling us what a real man is like. We can assume Red Riding Hood and the woodsman are supposed to be together, and this for older times meant they're going to get married and they're going to have children. The wolf couldn't, and frankly shouldn't be anywhere near children, and that barrenness, that inability to nurture, that's represented by the rocks in the belly. All the characters live happily ever after, except Grandma, who's dead, Wolf, who's hungry and dying, and Mother, who is now alone and can only look forward to a solitary life in the woods in the hope that the next generation will bring cake and keep the wolves away. It's clear that happy endings are for the young and good-looking. So that's the story of Little Red Riding Hood. If a simple fairy tale can contain all of this and so much more, think what stories from religious texts can contain. Think about the Greek myths perfected over 1,000 years. How much meaning is enveloped in all of that. There's a theory that much of the deeper meaning in all of these stories, that it's shared, that there's a common ancestor. Just like the evolution of the natural world, we have common ancestors for humans, common ancestors for stories. This is sometimes called the monomyth. It was popularised by Joseph Campbell in a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces in 1948. And it says that the perfect story repeated over countless eons is always the same. We start off with an ordinary world. There's a trigger to resolve some sort of crisis, which leads to a journey. A foe is there to defeat, and when the foe is defeated, there's a return home with some kind of gift to the world. It's true of Jesus, it's true of the Buddha, it's true of Frodo Baggins, and it's true of Luke Skywalker, especially as George Lucas used Campbell's book extensively in the writing. And if you watch a film like this, particularly a film like Star Wars or like Lord of the Rings, you can see these elements coming out again and again and again in so many of the films we watch. It's a real go-to Hollywood tool, but it's also a go-to human tool, and these things have lasted for thousands and thousands of years. And this reveals that when we're talking about myth, we're talking about deeper truth, not lies. The idea of Red Riding Hood or Jesus may not be literally true, but it's true psychologically, and it can give us clues as to how to move on, how to make decisions. They're ways of packaging the experiences of thousands of years of being human, no matter what kind of society they live in, and they can imprint on our lives in an understandable and actionable way. The Buddha sat beneath his tree. Muhammad flew to Mecca. Luke Skywalker confronted his father as a way of confronting himself. These are all traffic lights that we can analyse if we choose, but they work much better if we just let our bodies respond to them so that we can simply stop the car.